Yo, today we're gonna talk about rental. I received many messages and comments from my customers and my friends, and I haven't touched on the rental topic for my past few videos. So today we're gonna touch on rental problems. I think rental problems can be avoided easily. Way to do it is with a good tenancy agreement. So throughout my 9 years in real estate, I have include many clauses and new things to protect my customers from my experience and bad experience and all the funny tenants and landlords that I've experienced. Let's start. Okay, so the first thing in the tenancy agreement that is important is definitely the name of the landlord, the name of the tenant, and all the names of the landlord have to be inside, which is all the owner's name has to be stated as a landlord. Most of the time there will be one main tenant. So some of the tenants, when they are sharing an apartment, they will have 3 of them sharing. They would rather 3 of them sign a tenancy agreement. It's totally fine. Next thing is the address and how long is the lease. The normal lease term period is 12 months, 18 months, 24 months or more. State the rental price as well as the date of monthly payment. So if the rental starts from 1st, then the monthly payment should be on 1st. In the norm in the Singapore property market, for 1 year lease it will be 1 month deposit, 2 years lease it will be 2 month deposit. Okay, so we will just prorate accordingly. So it depends on how long is your lease. Telephone bills and utility charges should be charged to the tenant. Okay, so I have cases that some of the units, the utility charges is still on the owner's name and the tenant has to pay the owner directly. To me, this is a hassle and this is lots of risk. If the tenant choose not to pay, it's going to be a big problem. So I'd rather the tenant be in charge of the utility bills. So the tenant will just transfer the utility bills to their name. We will have a minor repair clause. So normally a minor repair clause for the first 1 month is fully covered, meaning that anything spoiled, the landlord will cover 100%. Then after the first 1 month, the tenant will have a minimum minor repair amount. So any repair and replacement of any parts or any item that needs repair, the first 150 will be borne by the tenant, then the rest will be borne by the landlord. But this does not cover negligence. This only cover wear and tear and things that spoil for no reasons. It doesn't cover negligence, for example, the tenant smashed the fridge door and the fridge door just fall off. Yeah, so such things doesn't get covered. Or they throw something onto the TV and the TV crack, I have even cases where toilet bowl can crack. So when it comes to rental, I think everything is possible. The other one is if it's a HDB flat, it has to comply with the HDB ruling. Okay. Oh yeah, before I forget, minor repair, normally I'll put 150 for HDB and 200 for private property. The next important thing is the aircon. The aircon is normally not included in the minor repair clause. So the aircon is quarterly servicing borne by tenant. If a repair is needed, the repair has to be borne fully by the landlord, provided the tenant has done the quarterly servicing. And this quarterly servicing in the contract should include topping up of gas as well as chemical cleaning that's advised by the aircon contractor. Okay, and I have experienced that a lot of tenants get freelance aircon contractor to service and clean their aircon. Doesn't have a company name. So in my contract, I stated that it has to be a licensed aircon contractor that is registered with ACRA. And I also included that topping out of gas and chemical cleaning, if required, is also part of servicing borne by the tenant. Any repair needed will be borne fully 100% by the landlord. So for HDB flat, there is sales, you can't sell it with tenancy. For private, you are allowed to sell with tenancy. And normally we state the number of people that is going to rent the place. So if there's 3, there's 3, there's 4, there's 4, we will state all their names. in my contract, I do not allow the tenants to change the subtenants at their own will. So all the subtenants details are actually stated in the contract itself. There's one new clause that I have experienced, so I've also added in that the tenant has to allow any HDB upgrading to be done in the unit or outside the unit, okay? And the tenant has to continue to rent these places. I have bad experience for like tenants that out of nowhere HDB announced like the toilet upgrading. So it's a big hassle. The tenant will call with the landlord to like says that it's a big hassle to him. He wants to stop the rental because of the upgrading. Then to the landlord it's a big problem because the landlord couldn't find a tenant to rent during the upgrading period. So I think this has to make clear. So in my contract I stated that to allow any HDB upgrading. So if the tenant is aware that there's a HDB upgrading and he decides not to rent at the start, it's totally fine, you know. But some HDB upgradings comes like right after they sign, so they have to still like obliged to it. So there's this thing called a diplomatic clause that is a bit complicated. So normally diplomatic clauses goes to people like not Singaporeans. So it normally applies only to lease to a lease period of like 2 years or more than 1 year. So the diplomatic clause will only start on the number 13 month onwards. So if it's a 1 year clause, normally there's no diplomatic clause. Okay, so how do you exercise the diplomatic clause? In the event that the tenant is asked to leave the country and he or she has a paper evidence that they want to leave the country, they will actually provide the paper evidence to the landlord to exercise the diplomatic clause. And the diplomatic clause actually states like you need to give like 2 months notice, or if you're not giving the 2 months notice, then you have to pay the 2 months rent in due, and you have to refund back the agent service fee in a prorate manner when that the landlord has actually paid the tenant. And also there's the option to renew, but to me the option renew is quite redundant because it's really we stated here like 2 months before you have to renew and 1 year, but it really subjects to negotiation, so the tenant and landlord has to come to a conclusion on this. I think one important thing is that there's no cancellation clause in my tenancy agreement. I do not allow a cancellation because it's quite unfair to the landlord when there's a cancellation, because the landlord has already paid the agent service fee for like let's say 2 years, or already like paid the property tax, and then it's going to cause a lot of trouble to the landlord if there's a cancellation, and also a lot of costs, unnecessary costs. The stamp duty is a must and is going to be borne by the tenant most of the time, as in to me all the time, and definitely it has to subject to the governing law as well as the HDB approval. So I think these are some of the basic things that you may want to check if it's in your tenancy agreement. It's better to state everything black and white, because I realized that when you have evidence and when you have things stated clearly in a tenancy, yeah, it's easier to come to a conclusion, it's easier to discuss rather than all the problems and everything. And also before the rental, I will actually take a photo of all the fixture and fittings and the walls of the place to show the real condition of the place when handed over to the tenant. Then I will also do a inventory list on the movable items like the TV, the fridge, and all this will be saved as records, so that at the end of the handover, is there any dispute, you know. I think the photos make a lot of difference, because we take the photo of the floor. You know, I have like cases where when they return it to us, the kids like draw all over the place. The floors are all with scratches. You know, these are really big problems. So the photos makes a lot of difference. The things that is stated in the tenancy agreement, to me, these are basic things. And I also stated an extra clause whereby any gravity or vandalization on the wall, the tenant has to pay for the repair of the whole wall, you know, instead of that part. So it's also stated in the tenancy agreement. So get yourself covered, get a good tenancy agreement. do the due diligence, take good photos of the house before you rent it out, do a good inventory list. You know, you can never be sure what is a good tenant and what is a good landlord, what is a bad tenant and what is a bad landlord. It doesn't come with the face. Okay, so get yourself covered. My last advice is try to go by the records, go by the books, go by the tenancy agreement, because any give in the middle of the tenancy agreement may cause a lot of conflict at the end. You know, so that's all for today. Good luck in your rental. If you need any help, call me. I actually link my YouTube channel to a website, which is www.myhandphonenumber.com. So if you go to this address, it will just link straight to my YouTube channel. Then I have like lots of videos there. So I'll continue to share more on the property related problems and questions. So thank you for watching. See you.